Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into something a little different? We're taking a look at Carl Mortier's children's book that also manages to introduce some pretty deep concepts from neurolinguistic programming, NLP.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, he uses this children's book format to make NLP, which can seem kind of complicated sometimes, much more accessible.
Right. I mean, at first glance, it's just this sweet story about a girl named Leonie, but there's a whole other layer, this deeper meaning woven in.
Exactly.
So before we get too far, for those who might not be familiar, could we quickly define NLP, just so everyone's on the same page?
Of course. NLP basically boils down to understanding how our thoughts, our language, and our actions all connect. And then it's about how we can use that understanding. How can we use it to reach our goals and live, better lives?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So how does Carl Mortier, the author and illustrator, connect this to like a children's story? It's kind of a unique approach.
Well, it starts with Leonie. She's trying to understand what her dad does for work. He's a coach. But instead of using all this technical jargon that would go right over her head, he uses metaphors and stories to explain these NLP concepts in a way that, a child can understand.
That's really clever. And that kind of reflects one of the core NLP principles, right? Meeting people where they are.
Exactly. Adapting your communication style so it really connects. It's essential for effective communication and for personal growth.
Okay, so tell me more about these metaphors. Is there one that stands out?
Well, the gardening one is pretty powerful. He compares coaching to gardening,
Okay.
talking about planting seeds of positivity, weeding out negative thoughts. It's a simple way to explain, well, personal transformation.
I love that. It's like we're all gardeners of our own mind.
Right.
We get to choose what we want to grow, what we want to let go of.
Exactly. And that's a big thing in NLP. We have the power to choose our thoughts, which then shapes our reality.
Okay, so let's talk about the story a bit more. I know Leonie goes on this dreamlike journey into this magical garden. What's the significance of the garden?
Well, the garden is like this brilliant metaphor for the human mind. And as Leonie explores it, she meets all these characters who each represent a different NLP principle or mental process.
That sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
So Carl Mortier created this fantastical world to show us how our minds work on the inside.
Exact.
So who are some of these memorable characters?
Okay, so right at the entrance, Leonie meets the gatekeeper.
Okay.
He's this imposing, wise figure, and he really stresses the importance of self-awareness and acceptance. He basically tells Leonie that personal growth starts with looking inward, exploring your own world.
That makes me think of the NLP concept of ecology, right?
Yeah.
Making sure our actions and goals actually align with who we are, our values.
You got it. And Carl Mortier does a great job weaving these concepts into the story without ever being too obvious about it. Makes it even more engaging.
So we've got the gatekeeper at the entrance to self-discovery. Who else does Leonie meet on her journey?
Well, she meets this puzzle man, and he makes paths in the garden using puzzle pieces. But he intentionally leaves gaps in the paths, which confuses Leonie at first.
Interesting. I'm sensing a lesson about problem solving here.
Exactly. The puzzle man explains those gaps are there to encourage creativity, flexibility. It's about realizing those missing pieces can be opportunities for growth and innovation.
That's a great way to reframe challenges. Like Carl Mortier saying, we don't always need all the answers right away. Sometimes it's about embracing the unknown and finding our own way.
It's a perfect example of the NLP concept of reframing. It's shifting your perspective, seeing challenges as opportunities, which Leonie really learns throughout the story.
And reframing is so important in everyday life, right? We get stuck seeing things only one way.
All the time. And NLP gives us tools to challenge those limiting beliefs, to look for other interpretations.
Okay, so we've met the gatekeeper, the puzzle man. Anyone else in this garden of the mind stand out?
Well, there's the colorblind butterfly. He can only see the world in black and white. But Leonie helps him experience all the vibrant colors through his other senses: touch, smell, sound.
Wow. So she's showing him that by changing his perceptions, he can open up new possibilities.
Exactly. It highlights the NLP idea of sensory acuity, using all our senses to gain a deeper, more nuanced understanding.
So Carl Mortier is encouraging us to go beyond our usual ways of experiencing things. Be more present, more open.
That's a great way to put it, and that's a core part of personal growth.
Okay, I am hooked. Tell me about another one.
All right, there's the clairvoyant mole. He represents the power of the past, how we can learn from it without letting it limit us.
Okay.
He spends all his time digging tunnels, often going back to old ones, but he tells Leonie the past is a foundation, not a prison.
That's profound. So he's saying we can acknowledge the past without letting it define us. Use it as a source of strength and wisdom.
Exactly. Finding that balance between honoring the past and embracing the present moment.
And NLP can be so helpful with that, right? It gives us the tools to reframe those past experiences and choose how they shape us.
Absolutely. And then speaking of reframing, we have another character, the compost beetle, Scarabee.
Ah, yes. Tell me about him.
Well, he's pretty sad because people just see him as, a sign of decay and waste.
Yeah.
But Leonie helps him reframe his role. She sees how important compost is, how it transforms waste into, well, fertile soil for new life to grow.
That's a perfect metaphor for NLP. Finding the hidden value in things we might see as negative.
And reminding us that even in what seems like decay, there's potential for growth, for renewal.
I'm seeing a pattern here. Carl Mortier seems to be suggesting that these challenges, these missing pieces, they're actually crucial for growth. It's not about avoiding the hard stuff. It's about learning how to deal with it,
Yeah.
with resilience.
Absolutely. And that's a basic principle of NLP. Challenges are opportunities for learning and transformation.
This is also interesting, and I love how Carl Mortier uses these simple characters and their stories to teach these really profound life lessons. It's like he's giving us a toolkit for managing our thoughts and emotions in a better way. But before we go too deep, I think we need to acknowledge this is a children's book. How does he manage to appeal to both kids and adults with such complex themes?
It's pretty remarkable. On the surface, it's this fun adventure. Kids will enjoy the story, discovering the world and learning valuable lessons.
Yeah.
But for adults, it's this subtle yet insightful introduction to NLP and how it can be applied.
It's like a book that works on multiple levels.
Right.
It's a children's book, but it's not just for children.
Exactly.
It's for anyone who's ever felt stuck, lost,
Yeah.
or just needs a little magic.
And it reminds us that even the most complex ideas can be made understandable through storytelling.
So true. So we met a few of these characters, but there's so much more to uncover.
Yeah.
I want to explore some of the NLP techniques that Carl Mortier weaves into the story. We've touched on a few, but I'm curious to see how they come alive through Leonie's adventures in the garden.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Carl Mortier's help, Mein Papa is ein Coach. We're going to continue exploring Leonie's journey through this garden, this metaphorical garden of the mind, and all those, those profound NLP lessons she comes across.
Yeah, I'm really curious to hear more about some of the specific NLP techniques, especially anchoring. I noticed it kind of subtly in the story with Leonie and the singing frog.
Ah, by the river. That's a great example, right. So first, Leonie is just mesmerized by this frog's beautiful song.
Right.
But then she falls into the river,
Mm.
and she's scared, disoriented. Later, back in her own bed, her dad suggests she draw her dream.
Hmm.
And as she draws, she's able to tap back into that feeling of calm she had when she was listening to the frog sing.
That's really interesting. It's like the drawing itself becomes an anchor that brings her back to that peaceful state.
Exactly. And that's what anchoring is in NLP. Connecting a specific feeling or state with a trigger. It could be a touch, a sound, an image, even a word.
So like if I'm feeling stressed or anxious, I could create an anchor, maybe a hand gesture or a mental picture that would bring me back to that calm, focused feeling.
Yes. It's like a shortcut to those resourceful states. And Carl Mortier illustrates it so well through Leonie without even explicitly using the word anchoring.
I'm really impressed with how he does that, weaves these concepts in so naturally. Speaking of relatable characters, I was really drawn to the clairvoyant mole and the compost beetle. They both kind of represent those parts of personal growth that are tough but so rewarding.
Yeah, they're fantastic examples of how Carl Mortier uses storytelling to present complex ideas in a really simple way. The clairvoyant mole, he lives in darkness, but he sees so clearly. He digs tunnels, often going back to old ones, like our tendency to dwell on the past.
Right, but he doesn't see that as a bad thing. He says, the past is a foundation, not a prison.
Exactly. He knows it's important to understand where we come from, but we can't let the past hold us back.
It's an important message for anyone who's struggling with, past hurts or regrets. NLP offers these tools for reframing those experiences, seeing them as chances to grow.
Absolutely. And then there's Scarabee, the compost beetle. He's so sad because everyone sees him as, well, decay and waste.
Yeah, but Leonie helps him change how he sees himself, right? She sees how essential compost is.
Exactly. And that's another perfect metaphor for NLP's transformative power. Taking what seems negative, undesirable, and finding the hidden value. It's not about what you're getting rid of, it's about what you're making space for.
It's like out of the ashes, a phoenix rises. Even in breakdown, there's potential for something new and amazing to emerge.
And that's so relevant today. We're constantly bombarded with negativity, fear. It's easy to get caught up in that. But Carl Mortier's book and NLP itself remind us that we can choose a different perspective, find hope, even in the midst of difficult times.
It's about building resilience, wouldn't you say? That ability to come back from setbacks, learn from mistakes, and keep going, even when things are uncertain.
Precisely. And that's a big part of NLP, recognizing we have the strength within ourselves to overcome challenges, to adapt to change, create a life that reflects our values and what we want.
And Carl Mortier chose a children's story, this seemingly simple tale, to get these empowering concepts across.
That's what's so special about it. Anyone can understand it. It doesn't matter how old you are, your background. It speaks to the shared human experience, the need for meaning, connection, personal growth.
Okay, I want to switch gears for a second and talk about one of the last scenes.
Yeah.
After Leonie wakes up, she's shaken up by what she experienced in the garden, but her dad encourages her to draw it.
And something amazing happens. As she draws, she reconnects with those positive emotions from the dream. It's like the drawing becomes a way for her to access those feelings whenever she wants.
Which goes back to the power of visualization in NLP. By imagining what we want, how we want to feel, we can actually change our brains and make it more likely to happen.
Exactly. And Leonie's experience is a reminder that we can use our imaginations to create a more positive life. We can choose to focus on what we want, visualize ourselves achieving those goals, and tap into those helpful emotions. It's about realizing we're not just passive in our own lives, we create our own reality.
I love that. Carl Mortier reminds us we all have that power. Okay, before we move on, I have to ask about the truth teller. That woman selling those crystal balls.
Of course. The discounted crystal balls. She's such a key part of the story. Leonie can't understand why anyone wouldn't want to know the truth.
Yeah.
But the truth teller explains that people are often afraid of it, especially if it doesn't fit with what they already believe, or if they're scared of what might happen if they acknowledge it.
It's like a commentary on how we avoid uncomfortable truths, even if it's stopping us from growing.
Right.
And in the last scene, Leonie's finished her drawing, and she picks up the crystal ball the truth teller gave her.
And she doesn't just see her reflection. She sees her inner world, all the emotions, everything she experienced in the garden. The crystal ball becomes a symbol of self-awareness, that ability to really see yourself clearly.
So Carl Mortier is saying that real growth requires honesty. Looking inward, we have to be willing to face those parts of ourselves we might not like.
And it's in those, those hidden places that we often find the most potential for growth. Leonie's willingness to look into that crystal ball, it shows her courage, her desire to understand herself.
It's a really beautiful ending to a really enchanting story. It leaves you feeling hopeful, knowing that we can all embark on our own journeys, explore those inner gardens, and create a life filled with meaning, joy, and being true to ourselves.
And that message really aligns with the core of NLP, empowering people to take control of their thoughts, their emotions, their lives, to become the authors of their own stories.
Well said.
Yeah.
And I think that's a perfect place to pause for now. When we come back, we'll dig into some of the bigger themes, the role of storytelling in personal growth, and the impact of a parent's guidance. Welcome back. We've been exploring Leonie's adventures and all these NLP ideas hidden in Carl Mortier's book. Now I want to talk about the bigger message of the book, how it might affect readers.
It's amazing how he takes these really deep ideas and puts them into a children's story. The things Leonie struggles with, the fear, the self-doubt, that's stuff we all deal with.
Right.
And how she overcomes those things. Through curiosity, being open-minded, reframing her perceptions, it's like a guide for personal growth.
It's like we all have this inner garden to take care of. We can choose to cultivate positivity, resilience. But I think it's really interesting that Carl Mortier uses storytelling to teach these things. Leah's dad doesn't lecture her about NLP. He uses stories, metaphors to engage her.
Right. It shows how powerful storytelling can be. Stories can get past our logical minds and speak to our emotions. They make abstract ideas more concrete, and as we see with Leonie, they can inspire us to change.
It makes you think about how we could use storytelling better in our own lives.
Yeah.
Sharing personal stories, using metaphors, maybe even thinking about our own life stories in a more empowering way.
Exactly. And I think that's a big takeaway from Carl Mortier's book. It's an invitation to rediscover storytelling and to use NLP to create a life that's more meaningful.
One thing that really stood out to me was the relationship between Leonie and her dad. It's such a great example of how a parent can encourage curiosity, emotional intelligence, and empower a child.
It's so heartwarming, the way they interact. He never talks down to her. He sees her as an equal, and he doesn't avoid these tough topics, emotions, self-awareness. He just finds a way to make them understandable for a kid.
It's a great lesson for anyone who works with children, parents, teachers, mentors. Meet them where they are, speak their language, and create a safe space for them to explore.
And it's not just about teaching kids, it's about learning from them too. Leonie's innocence, her sense of wonder, those are things her dad admires and learns from.
It's true. Kids are often the best teachers. They remind us of the simple joys, the beauty in everyday things, and to approach the world with curiosity and an open heart. I think that's a perfect place to wrap up our deep dive into Help, mijn papa is een coach. It reminds us that stories are powerful, we need to nurture our inner gardens, and we can have a big impact on each other's lives.
As you go from here, think about this. What stories are shaping your life? How can you use NLP to reframe your challenges? What positive things can you plant in your own life and in the lives of others?
And how can you approach your own self-discovery with that same sense of wonder Leonie has? Remember, even the longest journey starts with one step. And sometimes, that first step is just opening a book and letting yourself be swept away. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've been inspired to explore your own inner garden and the magic within.